They are called the German farmers of the Mexican desert, yet their own blood and their own language tell a different story that they never chose to hide, but simply forgot. Near Cuauhtémoc, in the high desert of Chihuahua, live tens of thousands of people the world calls the German farmers of Latin America. They speak a language outsiders hear as a kind of German. They kept High German as their written and church tongue. To Mexico, to tourists, to the newspapers, the label seemed obvious. These are Germans. But the label is an overlay, an administrative and linguistic coat of paint laid over something much older and much stranger. Because when scientists finally read the language carefully and then read the genome directly, the deepest layer that surfaced was not German at all. It was Dutch, Flemish, and Frisian. So how does an entire people end up carrying the wrong name for 400 years? To answer that, you have to follow them backwards, station by station, all the way to a Dutch priest who walked away from the Catholic Church in 1536. Every stop on that road left a mark, in their words and in their DNA. The question is, what those marks actually say. Part 1. A Dutch priest and a persecuted faith. The movement began with Menno Simons, a Dutch priest who left the Catholic Church in 1536. His followers took his name. The heartland of this new faith was not southern Germany, but the northern lowlands, Friesland, Flanders, East Frisia, and Holstein. These were Dutch and Flemish and Frisian people, part of the radical Reformation, and they were hunted. Persecution under the Duke of Alba drove many of them out of the Low Countries in the 16th century. That is the first, foundational fact the desert label erases. The Mennonites did not start as Germans who happened to be religious. They started as Dutch, Flemish, and Frisian believers fleeing for their lives. But refugees have to go somewhere, and where this particular wave of refugees landed would give them a new dialect, a new label, and eventually a name that would outlive the truth beneath it. They turned east, toward the Baltic, toward a river delta near a great trading city. And it is there that the disguise begins. Part 2. The Vistula Delta and the Birth of a Language. In the 1530s, Dutch Mennonites moved to the area around Danzig, today Gdansk, in Royal Prussia. Menno Simons himself visited around 1549. In 1569, Dirk Phillips founded the first Mennonite church in Danzig. These Vistula Delta Mennonites were mostly of Dutch descent, and they would live in West Prussia from the mid-16th century onward, roughly 200 years. Here is where the great misunderstanding was born. In that delta, a new dialect took shape in the 16th and 17th centuries, Plautdietsch, Mennonite Low German. It is a Low Prussian dialect of East Low German, but carrying clear Dutch influence. The people who forged it were Frisians, Saxons from East Frisia, folk from Flanders, and Central Europeans, and they kept a primarily Dutch and Low German identity, adopting High German only as a written language. Sit with that. The German you hear when they speak is a shell. Inside it lives Dutch. Today, Plautdietsch is spoken by roughly 400,000 to 450,000 people worldwide. But the Delta was not the last stop. An empire to the east was offering land, and the people were about to become something rarer than refugees. They were about to become a genetic island. In the late 1700s, around 400 founding families left the Vistula Delta and settled a colony called Chortitza in what is now Ukraine, then Imperial Russia. That number matters. 400 families. From that narrow gate, an entire population would descend. Geneticists have a term for what happened next. The group became a distinct genetic isolate, and medical genetics literature is blunt about who these people were. It classifies the Old Colony Mennonites as of Dutch and German origin, originating in the Netherlands before their roughly 200-year stay in the Vistula Delta. The Netherlands first, the Delta second. That is the recorded order. But an isolate is a double-edged thing. When a whole people descends from a few hundred families, the genome remembers. Rare mutations that would normally vanish in a large population instead get amplified, passed down, concentrated. The Mennonites' 500-year history was shaped by at least 3 demographic bottlenecks, plus founder effects, inbreeding, epidemics, and migrations. Each squeeze narrowed the gene pool further, and that narrowing would, centuries later, become the very thing that let scientists read their origins like a text. But first, there was another promise to chase, on another continent. Part 3. The Broken Promise and the Road to Mexico. In 1873, Canada wrote them an invitation, a document the Mennonites called the Privilegium, or the Low Letter. It offered land, exemption from military service, and their own private schools. That last promise was sacred to them, because the school was where the community reproduced itself. The original letter was so treasured, and then so forgotten, that it was only rediscovered in 2015 in a church basement in Steinbach. But the promise broke. Manitoba in 1916 and Saskatchewan in 1917 passed school laws that used public schooling to assimilate immigrant children. Mennonites who resisted faced fines, property confiscation, even jail. So the old colony did what they had always done. They left. They signed a new Privilegium, this time with Mexican authorities, and began buying land in Chihuahua. Emigration started in March 1922. Post-revolutionary Mexico offered privileges in exchange for cultivating marginal desert land. Colonies rose in Chihuahua in 1922 and in Durango at Nuevo Ideal in 1924. Between 1922 and 1929, roughly 8,000 migrants made the journey, over 13% of Canada's entire Mennonite population. They arrived as strangers with a strange tongue, and Mexico, hearing that tongue, reached for the nearest word, German. The label stuck, but the genome does not read labels. Part 4. When the DNA finally spoke. For a century, the community grew. Starting with about 3,000 colonists in 1922, the Mexican Mennonites swelled to roughly 100,000 within 100 years, before declining to 74,122 by 2022 as people migrated out. About 50,000 still live near Cuauhtémoc. And in that century, science caught up with them. A genome-wide analysis of more than 580,000 genetic markers found Mennonite ancestry to be virtually 100% European, with no Native American or Sub-Saharan African admixture, and its closest affinity to Central Europeans, while the historical records pointed to the Netherlands as the core of the original diaspora. Then came the Y chromosome. A study of Mexican and Bolivian-descended Mennonites found their paternal haplotypes most closely related to Central and Northern Europeans, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and Denmark, with the Netherlands the single best match, and the isolate revealed its fingerprints. A Dutch origin founder mutation in the gene FAN-CC, first documented in Manitoba Mennonites, still surfaces in these communities. Other founder variants gather in dense concentration. A BCKDHA variant, driving maple syrup urine disease to a carrier frequency as high as 1 in 10, and an incidence near 1 in 380 births, against roughly 1 in 185,000 in the general population. The Old Colony branch in Alberta produced the world's largest reported familial clusters of insulin-dependent diabetes, autoimmune disease, and Tourette syndrome. Whole exome study of South Brazilian Mennonites found dozens of pathogenic variants, with founder effects behind 96% of them. Gene Reviews now keeps a dedicated table of variants common to the Mennonite population. Every one of these is a chapter of that 400-year journey, written in the body itself, pointing home. Part 5. The name beneath the name. So, who are the Old Colony Mennonites of Mexico? Not simply German farmers. That name is the youngest layer, an administrative echo of a written High German they adopted only for church and page, wrapped around a Low German dialect that was itself shaped by Dutch. Beneath the language sits the genealogy, and beneath the genealogy sits the genome, and both keep pointing to the same place their history always named: the Netherlands, Flanders, Frisia, a Dutch priest in 1536, a delta near Danzig, 400 families at Chortitza, a broken promise in Canada, a desert in Chihuahua. Each station added a layer, and the outermost layer got mistaken for the whole. The remarkable thing is that the bottlenecks that concentrated their inherited illnesses are the very same events that preserve their origins so clearly. The isolate that made them medically fragile also made them legible. Their suffering and their history are written in the same alphabet. The people who plow the high desert of Chihuahua carry in every cell the record of refugees who left the Low Countries almost 5 centuries ago, and who never really stopped being who they were. The label said, German. The blood and the words still say Dutch, Flemish, and Frisian. If this story touched on questions of inherited disease in your own family, speak with a qualified genetic counselor or your physician. Community and clinical genetics support services exist to help you understand your options with care and confidentiality.